It's Friday the 13th. It's October. It's fall. What better time than to read horror books? Hi friends, I'm Libby. This weekend we're going to be reading a bunch of spooky reads. I don't have a predetermined TBR, but I'm going to be picking up horror books as I go. So the first one is going to be Lone Woman by LaValle. This one, I believe, follows a woman in the early 1900s in the US, and she's fleeing from her past life into a new one, and she has a trunk with her, and that's kind of the crux of the spooky element. We don't know what's in the trunk. Hopefully it's something scary. I'll let you know how it goes. Most of the trees have already lost their leaves. There's lots left on that one, but most of them are on the ground. They fell because it's fall. Okay, this is so fun so far. So this woman, she is a lone woman. Surprise. She's going, like I think I said before, she's going from California to Montana. She basically is leaving one climate and one farming stead for another one. The author kind of describes like the vastness of the flat plains in Montana, and just drove across the country through the prairies, Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and just like really connected with that journey that I had just been on. It's going great so far. Almost halfway through Lone Women. I'm really enjoying it so far. Some parts are a little bit repetitive, but I really like the writing style. It's kind of sarcastic, but then really insightful at the same time, and I think he's doing a great job with the characterization. Although, like, we really know that the main character, she's tall. She's a tall lady. She's strong. Like, it's a bit much. It's been ominous so far, but I'm not really on the edge of my seat in any way. So I hope the atmosphere is kind of ramped up a little bit. Good morning. It is not morning. Don't be fooled by me wearing the same outfit. It is the next day. It's now Saturday. It's no longer Friday the 13th, but that's okay. We're gonna be spooky all weekend long. I have a bunch of books here that were in the little house. I have to go put them in the other house because they're just taking up space. So I'm gonna go do that, and then haven't really gone outside today, so I'm gonna go for a little paddle and finish up Lone Woman. Okay, so while I'm walking down to the water, let me tell you my thoughts about the book. It's a bit slow paced, but I like the setting, I like the characters. The first part was definitely focused mostly on the one character. And now in part two, we are kind of seeing more perspectives of people in the entire community. And while it's still a bit ominous and kind of paranormal, it's kind of turning more into like a community drama, sort of. It's definitely more like historical fiction literary than I was expecting. I thought it would be a bit more horror, so it's a little bit disappointing, especially because I'm doing like a horror vlog, but I'm really enjoying it, so not mad. So I just finished reading Lone Women by LaValle. This was good. I think I'm gonna give it 3 stars. The beginning was really good. It made it seem like it was going to be spooky, but it didn't really turn out to be that way. And it's about this really interesting period of history that I really don't know anything about, but in Montana, lone women were able to buy their own plots of land, and if they succeeded in creating a farm and living off the land, they got to keep the land. And I had never really known anything about this, so it was really cool, that aspect of it. Like I said before, it goes from focusing on the main character to focusing a lot more on the community as a whole, and I think that's definitely more of what the book is really about. It's not a horror, it's about being on the outskirts of a community. It's about feeling welcome, but still like you're an outsider, especially in terms of racial discrimination. There's also an element that is kind of like from the movie Us, the Jordan Peele movie. So I thought that was cool, but nothing about this like really stood out to me. I liked the writing style, I liked the characters, but it wasn't anything that blew me away. So I think I'm gonna give it 3 stars. I enjoyed it. I was hoping for it to be a little bit spookier. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about it. Okay, so after sleeping on it, I have a couple more thoughts about Lone Women. The whole idea of this thing being in the trunk and what is gonna be in the trunk. Well, I love that trope. I think it's maybe kind of cheap, some would say, but I think it's very effective, and I think it's a good way to build suspense. But because it's such a well-known trope, it has to make it worth it in the end, and I didn't really think it was worth it in the end, particularly after we have that reveal and then where it goes from there. It kind of loses sight of what he was trying to do. I think he had so many different ideas of what he wanted to incorporate into this novel, and because none of them were fully fleshed out, it just felt anticlimactic. Those are the rest of my thoughts. Up next, we have Vampires of El Norte by Isabelle Cañas. I'm really excited for this one. Vampires is literally in the title, so if this isn't scary, I'm gonna be upset. What is this about? This one kind of has the same vibes as Lone Women, but I think it is going to be a little bit spookier. So it's a historical, and there's a rancher, and there's monsters. I'll update you when I'm a little bit into this one. For dinner, I'm having Cheetos mac and cheese because I literally can't think of anything spookier than powdered cheese. So I'm about 70 pages into Vampires of El Norte. This one feels more substantial than Lone Woman. It has a sense of directionality. Like, this is where we're starting, this is where we're going, that I think Lone Woman kind of lacked that forward thrust of narrative, and it kind of got a little convoluted. Whereas this one feels like it's definitely planned out. Basically, we're following this man and this woman, and they knew each other when they were kids, and they loved each other, but then an accident happens, and they're torn apart from each other. And then we flash forward. Both of the main characters are headed in the direction of the war. There's definitely a lot more atmospheric descriptions, which are making it feel a lot spookier than the first one. Some of the metaphors that the author uses, she uses them over and over again, which is a really big pet peeve of mine. But other than that, I'm actually really enjoying it. Feels a little bit cheesy, the romance aspect of it, but I think it's gonna be fun, so. The writing style is very dramatic. Let me just read a little section for you. His soul bore her brand, the wound deep and blackened and scarred over. From the day he left Los Ojuelos, a part of him knew that his life was now a game of second bests, of good enoughs, a meager harvest grown in the long shadow of her absence. Silent, reverent, he watched the glimmer of the flame reflected in her dark, liquid eyes. Candlelight gilded the tips of her eyelashes and danced along her hairline. Caressing the brown hair swept elegantly away from her face. She was a woman now, and more beautiful than he ever could have imagined. It's a bit much. Also, just as an example of what I was saying about the repeated metaphor, the author is using dramatic irony in the sense that we know that the woman, this isn't a spoiler, we know that the woman is alive, but the man thinks that she's dead, right? And so for him, there are these two truths that are kind of battling against each other. And earlier on, she uses the metaphor of a taut rope and being pulled by these two different truths, and then the rope snaps, which I thought was a really cool metaphor, and it was the way she laid it out through the chapter was pretty effective. But then in this chapter, she's talking about the same thing, these two different truths, and how they're pistols aimed at each other, and he doesn't know which one's gonna fire first. Obviously, guns and rope are different, but it's the exact same metaphor, pretty much, which just makes it, like, completely ineffective and kind of cheesy. So that's kind of what I mean by the repetitive metaphor. It's super duper gloomy today. Looks like shit outside. I was gonna go to a pumpkin patch or something like that, but I think I want to wait for a sunnier day. So we're gonna go get some wood from the wood shack, and I'm gonna make a fire, and we're just gonna have a cozy reading day today. I also finished my puzzle, but something else spooky happened. There's a piece missing. It is such a freaking Gorgina day. I have 50 pages left of this. I'm gonna go finish them in the kayak, and then I'll let you know how it went. I should have worn sunglasses. Okay, so I have finished Vampires of El Norte by Isabelle Cañas, and I have a lot of thoughts. I'm not quite sure what I'm gonna rate it yet. I think once I talk all my thoughts out, I'll have a better sense of what I want to give it. I think this one is definitely suffering from misleading marketing. I knew there was gonna be romance in it, but I thought the romance would be a subplot in a horror book. However, the main plot is the romance. The story arc is the two main characters who loved each other when they were children coming back into each other's lives. And it explores how they've both grieved for each other while they were out of each other's lives. And now that they're in each other's lives, they have a really tense relationship, and it's kind of showing how that develops. I'm not a big romance reader. I rarely ever read romance. The only romances I've read in the past 2 years are like that time I yeeted a love potion at a vampire or something like that. So I'm not like totally familiar with all of the tropes and the nuances of the romance genre. But what I will say is I didn't love the romance in this, and the romance was most of the book. I felt a sense of whiplash almost with how the characters interacted with each other. They would go from really tender, beautiful moments that I was like, oh, this is cute, to just being horrible to each other. And I'm familiar with the miscommunication trope, and that definitely was a major player in this one. They were acting like petulant children, and it was driving me insane. Like, I understand all of these warring emotions and battling with themselves and the forbiddenness of it, but they were just horrible to each other. And in the end, spoilers, I guess, they get together and they get married, but I really didn't sense why they liked each other. They were friends in their childhood, and those sections you can definitely see why they love each other. They spend all this time together, they learn together, they grow together, they teach each other things. But in the present day, all they're doing is talking in circles around each other and getting angry with each other, and then every once in a while being like, oh, he's so beautiful, I love him, and then having these tender moments, but they're not really built off of anything in the present day. Also, because it's a romance book, that means I'm just not the target audience. Yeah, I liked where the horror aspect was going, where the historical war aspect was going, but it was just completely overshadowed by this romance, which was really unfortunate. I think the author did a great job with putting us in this historical setting and building this world. At the beginning, she does a really great job with imagery and scene setting, but then it kind of devolves from there because she starts to use the same images, the same metaphors, and it just becomes completely repetitive to the point where it no longer is evoking the atmosphere that it was at the beginning. I have a couple of spoilery thoughts about the end of the book, so I'll mark this little section with a spoiler section, but with a spoiler note. At the very end of the book, the main evil spooky thing are vampires, and the American soldiers end up kind of using the vampires as a weapon. And at the end of the novel, they're back at their community. They've fled from the war zone, and they're back at their ranch, and they're invaded by Texan soldiers and the vampires. And the way this is all resolved is the main woman character, she just asks them to leave. she just asks the vampires to leave. And they do. It's like, I don't want you here. Can you please go away? And they listen to her. And the reason why she was able to do this is because when she was a kid, she was bit by a vampire. And for some reason that gives her this power to speak with them and for them to listen to her. So they just leave. What? Ugh. Okay, there's also, on the opposite spectrum, a scene at the very end of the book where the main guy character is on his horse and he's fucking lassoing vampires and chopping their heads off with a machete. But that was one page. And that was like so fucking sick. That was the coolest page of the entire book. And I just wanted more like that. So, yeah. I'm disappointed. It just felt A, mismarketed, B, lost potential, C, overwritten. So I think I'm gonna give it a 2, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. So there we are. I read 2 books for this spooky vlog. Neither of them ended up being spooky, so that's a big L. But I read Vampires of El Norte by Isabelle Cañas and Lone Women by LaValle, and they were both fine. What a fucking dud. Anyways, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video anyways, even though the books didn't end up being spooky. Thanks for watching.